Good evening. I'm Steve Leisman, CNBC senior economics reporter and huge fan of the Council for Economic Education, or CEE. I'm back for I don't know how many times now, 8, 9, or 10, but I'm here for our second virtual benefit, and it appears they've gotten the virtual chicken and the virtual wine and the virtual asparagus much better this year, is my understanding. So I don't know about the rest of you, but I didn't expect this to be the second pandemic a virtual event we were going to do. But here we are, and we're going to make the best of it. We're going to get this done. It's going to be very interesting, but it's also going to be fast. And so we'll get you home. Well, you probably are home. But anyway, we'll get you going with what you're going to do before real quick. Nonetheless, there are silver linings to this virtual gatherings. Calendars, they're not the tyrants of our lives anymore. So, for instance, I'm in two places right now. I'm here with you, but I'm on Cape Cod. Very happy to be with all of you. A really great community up here. Those of you who understand the value of personal, financial, and economic education for our kids and support a truly stellar organization in achieving that aim, CEE. Really glad to be here. Okay, we all know that this education works for kids in providing access to better opportunities, but it also works in arriving at solutions to some of this century's more complex problems. We are the people who work at what works, who steady the ship, who stay the course, and who provide for those following after us. And nothing better to provide for our kids than essential tools for understanding, analyzing, and improving the world. So being in two places at once tonight, well, not too bad for me anyway, and hopefully okay for you. Now, I hope that you are drinking those special spring cocktails which CEE concocted, and that you took a moment to take our money personality quiz. If you missed it, there's a button on the top of your screen. So we're beginning the evening by putting you back in the student seat with two examples of the work CEE does in the field. That is the classroom, and that quiz will play a role in our first example. After that, you'll see a very brief video highlighting CEE's other programs. Hear a bit from CEE's remarkable CEO, Nan Morrison, and close out the evening with our fireside chat with three leaders in finance and economics, all committed to solving problems, doing more with less, and doing more with more. I always look forward to that. And doing their best, by the way, to address multi-pronged problems with multi-pronged solutions that improve lives. But first now, I'm happy to say here a few remarks here from CEE's chairman of the board and a good friend of mine, Barry Hames.
Thank you, Steve. Good evening, and thanks so much for joining us. In spite of all the challenges from COVID-19 over the past 15 or so months, I'm pleased to report that our CEO, Nan Morrison, and her team pulled together and used this crisis as an opportunity to provide expanded access to economics and personal finance for our kids and their teachers. We were able to deliver our programs virtually and support our teachers, among the true heroes in this crisis, in their time of need. And the pandemic highlighted the importance of these tools as our economy was shaken to its core, exacerbating the health crisis that we were all facing. As I'm never tired of repeating, everyone uses economics every day as a consumer, saver, investor, borrower, and voter. And so teaching these subjects is core to every individual's well-being and to the effective functioning of our society. So thank you all for your support to enable us to continue this vital work. This evening, we will give you a glimpse of some of our key programs. We hope you enjoy the presentations and the evening, and we look forward to enjoying your company in person next year. On behalf of the board, I would like to thank Nan and the entire CEE staff for their amazing accomplishments in this very stressful year. We have your back. Thank you.
Thanks, Barry. I agree entirely with what you said. CEE just gets the job done so well and in a very difficult year. Now, let's get back to that money personality quiz and how CEE uses this in its highly successful program, Invest in Girls, which introduces high school girls to careers in finance and providing instruction, mentorship, and hands-on experience.
My name is Shannon Taylor, and I'm an educator of Invest in Girls, a program of CEE, where our mission is to usher in the first generation of financially literate girls and give them access to careers in finance. I'm excited that you're about to see a clip of me discussing the money personality results with 5 high school girls. At IIG, we start our personal finance curriculum, Becoming the CFO of Your Life, with the money personality quiz because it's important that students are knowledgeable and have a basic understanding of their money personality to plan and structure their goals when making financial decisions, whether those decisions are in spending, saving, or investing their money. In the video, you will see the students expressing their viewpoints and perspectives of their money personality and how they see money now. I hope you were able to take the money personality quiz, which is the same quiz that the students took beforehand, and are able to relate to some of what you are about to hear in this segment. These girls are super adorable and will surely make you smile. I promise. So enjoy. So let's talk about your money personality. Do we have any collectors in the room? From responses, yes. Collectors, you want to see your money make money. Can you give an example of the money personality that responds? Yes, Brittany.
So an example of me being a collector, I remember when I was in middle school, I had a lot of like single dollar bills. And so in school, we would have a vending machine and all of my friends would ask me for $1 because they would only have like big bills. And so then I would lend them the money and then I would put interest on them if they didn't pay me back within a week.
Oh my
And
gosh.
the interest rate was outrageous too. I was like, oh, if you don't pay me back within a week, it's 25 cents added on.
Oh wow.
Every day.
That is a lot of interest. What about thinker? Emily, tell us about that.
Well, I definitely agree that I'm a thinker because I'm very conscious of like the purchases I make, and it kind of, if I'm spending too much, I think about how I could have spent it better, or if I'm not spending, I acknowledge that as well.
Lastly, miser. Oh, Christina's a miser. Talk to us about that, Christina.
I don't like to spend money. I only spend money when I need to. I'm not going to spend money just to do it.
Do you think that your money personality can change?
I definitely think that your money personality can change with time, because as you mature and you go through life, you have a lot of different experiences that will change how you think about money.
I think especially since COVID was unexpected, some people kind of lost their jobs and they had to change their mindset of how they spend their money.
Like say for instance, you're a spender. So like as time goes on, maybe you start to like get bills, you live in an apartment, you have all these bills that are piling up. So then you need to start budgeting. So you might become sort of like a miser in a sense. So you might want to save your money and instead put that towards that instead of just spending it wherever.
Really, really, really good. Now that you know your money personality, does it change the way you think about money?
Well, now that I know that I'm a collector, I kind of view money as more than just like equal trade. It's more of like, with what I have, I can grow it even without spending.
Since I'm overall a collector, that I could take that, a little bit of that money to spend on something I want.
That with every money personality, you need to have a plan, a financial plan. So if you are a spender, then you may want to have your bills automatically set up to come out of your account. If you are a collector, you want to have a meeting with a financial planner, a portfolio manager, talk about investments. And actually knowing your money personality is the start of creating your own financial plan. Thank you so much. Great job.
Okay, what I really like there, besides pointing out that there are different approaches to money management, is that Shannon also emphasizes the possibility for changing our approach to money. Now, let's see if I'm right about all of you and which personality types dominate in our audience. I understand they're putting up a poll now. Okay. A spender, a thinker. Okay. Collector. We don't have hoarder in there, do we? We have hoarder? What if you're a hoarder? That's not one of the choices. All right, so if you didn't, okay, 53% are collectors. Oh, Miser's 12%. I want a thinker to be higher. But if you didn't take the quiz, just pick a personality type and answer the poll. I'm guessing that most of us fall under one category anyway. Note that I suspect, is it collectors? I don't know. I can't see the poll, folks. But is it collectors? That's the top one, or is it? Cool. All right, there we go. So let's go on to our next classroom activity. This time it is a tutorial for our teachers who become the students. This is one of 6 new lessons that CEE prepared on economics and COVID. And by the way, we've got a great discussion about this coming up later. And you're going to see a snippet of a teacher training session here that delivers some unexpected results. Be ready to vote on which industry you think deserves to be bailed out due to COVID.
In today's lesson, we're going to be discussing bailouts and how you might allocate.
This lesson and others are available free on econedlink.org. After the teacher's training, the video will roll right into a presentation of the Alfred P. Sloan Awards to 3 of our New York area's best of the best teachers.
In today's lesson, we're going to be discussing bailouts and how you might allocate funds during a crisis like we have right now with COVID-19. Today's lesson that we're doing is super relevant, really engaging for the students. They're learning what bailouts are, and then they get to act as a congressperson to decide which industries get bailed out because of the COVID-19 crisis. You can tell me what a bailout is. Yeah.
Money.
I'm voicing it like a kid. Maybe during the recession when like the banks got bailed out.
We're teaching a group of teachers at my high school who teach economics and business. So today what we're going to be looking at is how do we decide who gets bailed out? The industries that the students get to choose from, there's many different ones. There's agriculture, construction, airline, retail, pro sports, entertainment industries, the healthcare industry. Once you know your votes, just stick your 3 sticky notes wherever you want. Right away after we talk about bailouts, we get the students on their feet and they start voting for which industries they think should be bailed out. I won't comment as to not influence your decisions. So you're about to be voting as well, just like our teachers did, for which industries you think should be bailed out, and it'll be interesting to see how your votes compare to the teachers in my classroom. So let's see, we've got a lot of votes for agriculture, healthcare, and so those are tied for first. Who was our entertainment? Yeah, Tom. So
I'm the only one who picked the single one on entertainment. I'm the single one on airlines.
Airlines also.
I chose retail.
Okay, you picked retail.
Yeah, so I felt people should still be able to go buy toilet paper.
Agriculture, construction, and healthcare.
Tell us your rationale for bailing them out.
Those really are the foundation of the country.
After our first round of voting, we bring in this twist, which is more economic data. So the students see how many people are employed in that industry. They see what the economic impact would be. They learn how many other jobs might be indirectly created because of those industries, and they get to change their opinions based off of that data. So I'll give you guys a minute to demonstrate what the students might be saying. Take a minute.
The job potential for indirect jobs is big.
Right. The interesting thing is some of this data might actually surprise you.
I was surprised to see how many people are in construction.
Because you might not be aware of how many people work in these industries or the actual economic impact or the multiplier effect within certain industries. Lots of our students didn't realize entertainment and pro sports creates many other jobs indirectly within the community. I'm going to ask you once you're ready to come up here and put your votes in for round number 2, and we'll be able to compare to round 1. In round 3, they get different data that shows them what their voters want and what the lobbyists want in their district. So they're not thinking like economists, but they're thinking like politicians. And that's when it gets really interesting.
And now we are pleased to present the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation Teaching Champion Awards, given to 3 extraordinary economics teachers in the New York metropolitan area.
Rachel is a super supportive teacher, which means a lot to me. And the way she teaches, she makes it really fun. And when she makes it fun, she makes it in a way that it's better to understand, which is so helpful to me because I don't like math, and the way that she teaches math actually showed me the importance of it and the usefulness of it in my daily life. She actually changed my perspective on teachers in general, and I'm very happy to have had her as my teacher. And now I'm honored to introduce Rachel Goldstein.
Thank you so much, Lily. And as much math as I taught you, that's how much music you taught me. So we're both leaving innovation this year with some new helpful knowledge. So I am proud to be teaching a course that promotes independence and equity for my students. Throughout this entire year, we've been remote. So my main concerns were connecting with students and making engaging content. And I think that lesson on tax law that was entirely SpongeBob themed did the trick. I look forward to not only seeing this new curriculum grow in my school, but also seeing my students grow as they leave Innovation High School armed with the financial literacy they need to succeed in the world.
This was a hard year. In a teaching environment such as remote learning, holding the attention of students who are in the comfort of their own homes and surrounded by distractions is no easy feat. Mr. Frost's versatility in teaching kept me interested. There's always a new resource to learn from, whether that's a PowerPoint, a lecture, a YouTube video, a period dedicated to graph drawing, or a podcast. I can say with certainty that this is the only class where I've ever learned through graphic novels, and as an avid superhero fan, that is greatly appreciated. With our daily check-in questions, we always have time set aside for topics ranging from elections and the pandemic to our favorite movies and weekend plans. In a time where the days feel endlessly repetitive and dull, Mr. Frost's class was a much-needed breath of fresh air. It's my honor to introduce Mr. Frost.
Thank you, Ferris, and thank you for those kind words. Students like you make this year so much easier to not only get through, but to also to do our best to thrive in that environment. I want to thank the Council for Economic Education for honoring me and the community of Brooklyn Technical High School with this award. Economic education is such an important facet of the high school experience, especially with high school seniors. I think it's such an honor to teach AP Macro, in which I get to combine a economics course with a government course and really get a group of college-bound seniors really ready for their experience to go off to college, do great things in the world, and then have that great background of those two areas together really to make themselves succeed. So it's through their hard work that I'm so happy to be here before you. So thank you again.
Mr. Menfee is one of the most beloved teachers in our school, always putting his students first. He's well known for his really fun lessons, and even in times like this where resources are limited for teachers, he has managed to make every lesson as interesting, fun, and educational as possible. Attending to his class is one of the most exciting parts of my day. I've always said this, and I will keep on saying it, the world needs more teachers like him. I feel really grateful and truly honored to have him as my teacher, and he will forever be one of the people I look up the most. I truly want to have his endless passion for my future career. And here is Mr. Menfee.
If you're trying to make me cry, Perla, it's probably going to work. Oh, man. Thank you. Thank you so much, Perla, and it's going to make saying this incredibly easy. This award goes to you. It goes to you, and it goes to the hundreds of other students that I have had, that I have been lucky to have as my time as an educator. You guys make this all worth it. You guys make all the work, all the blood, all the sweat, and all the tears worth it. Without you guys, none of this would be possible. So I want to thank you, Perla. I want to thank all of my students. Thank you so much for everything you do every single day.
Really very moving. They're just great. Our award winners, as well as their schools, receive a cash prize and opportunities to share their knowledge at our annual educator conference and other CEE workshops. A senior fellow at Stanford once wrote this: "The quality of the teachers in our schools is paramount. No other measured aspect of schools is nearly as important in determining student achievement." This was recognized by CEE nearly 75 years ago. And they continue to work diligently, robustly, comprehensively to give teachers what they need to be great so their students can be great. Now, before we join Nan Morrison, the CEO of CEE, and our honorees this evening, we want to take a brief pause. Give you all a chance to add to your donations. Just keep clicking the button, please. Or perhaps donate for the first time. Find that button and click it if you don't mind. And do so generously if you can. But here's a brief video highlighting some of the programs we could not bring you live this evening.
I really want to applaud the work that the Council on Economic Education does. I think it's essential, as important as the traditional 3 R's, that students, by the time they're in high school, have some training in personal finance and also in economics more broadly.
For teachers across America, it's all about that moment. That moment when their student gets it. The Council for Economic Education works on multiple fronts, giving economics and personal finance teachers the tools to find that moment.
I just want to give them an opportunity to roll up their sleeves a little bit and get a better understanding of how economics impacts their life.
I actually had a kid who came to me and he said, but I'm gonna tell you, I used all that stuff you taught me in that class so many times. He said, I have to say thank you, which, you know, that's why you teach.
CEE's Econ EdLink offers hundreds of free, relevant, interactive, and effective lessons to help teachers engage and motivate students at every level. It's completely free and incredibly popular, tracking almost 800,000 teachers a year. CEE also reaches teachers directly, including at its annual teacher conference. CEE's biennial survey of the states shows how important their mission is. Last year, CEE's survey of the states showed that only 25 states required economics to be taught. For personal finance, only 21. And worse, as with so many educational opportunities, there is a shocking access gap, with kids in wealthier neighborhoods having more access to financial education. Each year, the Council inspires over 30,000 students to compete in national competitions.
I don't think I would have ever thought about finances if it wasn't for this challenge.
In the National Personal Finance Challenge, high school students work in teams to present a financial plan to judges.
Today we're going to be coming up with a financial plan for the Hernandez family.
With the 401k, the money in the account can build interest over time.
Let's get this competition started.
And the National Economics Challenge has entered its 3rd decade.
This was probably the most intense experience I've ever had.
It was very fun.
I don't think you can get better than this in terms of a competition.
Daring to prove economics can be fun.
Econ Challenge has probably been one of the most influential activities I've ever done in high school. I would never go back and not join my freshman year. I would tell everyone to join it.
And CEE reaches our littlest learners through events like Family Financial Fun Nights.
We're learning how math's fun. Because like when you grow up, you won't have money.
We're learning, but we're also having a good time.
Yes, I love all my teachers because they're like a second mother to me, or a second father.
Economics is my favorite part, of course, the money part.
That's great. I have supported CEE for a good number of years. I'd like to say I support them going back to when I had hair, but I haven't had hair for a very long time, so really wouldn't tell us anything. But this year, I really saw their mettle, their resolve, and their resourcefulness and how well they responded to this crisis. It was inspiring. Maybe take a minute. Say thank you by investing in the teachers, invest in the families, invest in the kids that they support. There's a donation button at the top right of your screen. After the pause, we connect with Nan in yet another location. So we're just going to relax here for about 90 seconds. We're going to hear some Mozart, and then who better but Nan on the other side of Mozart.
It is often said that money is not everything, but it does rank high up there with oxygen. When we empower our students through financial education and other necessary life skills, not only would we transform their lives, but we would be changing family narratives for generations to come.
Thanks to all of you who've opened your wallets once again this evening. All of us at CEE, as well as our students and teachers, are grateful. Now it's time for the second part of our evening, the fireside chat. As Steve said, I'm the bridge to that. Yes, Nana's bridge. Well, it's all about infrastructure this year right now, isn't it? Anyway, actually this year it seemed particularly apt for me to speak at this juncture in the evening. The natural transition from the seeds planted by educating our children in these subjects to the oak trees grown sturdy and strong in the work of our Visionary Award honorees. Our honorees all transform aspiration into reality. Utilizing economics, corporate management, and finance, they improve countless lives for women, minorities, hourly workers, for all those on the outside of networks, access, and to specialized knowledge. All of us gathered here know the leverage that those things give us. We don't enter a bank or a financial relationship ashamed or afraid of being shamed. We aren't unbanked or underleveraged, as are so many small and minority-owned businesses. We aren't intimidated by what we don't know, because our baseline knowledge makes it possible to differentiate a sales pitch from a sound investment. We know how to negotiate, we know what is out there, we know our worth, we know how to navigate the real world. It gives us balance and a sense of control. And because we are always still learning, we know the value of knowledge and skill. For nearly 75 years now, CEE has sought to bridge these gaps for the majority of our kids and for the sake of the legitimacy and longevity of our political and economic system. Nearly 75 years ago, we wrote textbooks for grades K through 12 because there were none. Today, we host a digital platform, Econ EdLink, to provide teachers with an A to Z support in teaching these subjects, whether in a children's literature class or in algebra. CEE adapts to change and we drive it. Today, we're focused on eliminating opportunity gaps by focusing efforts on low and moderate income communities, our access zones. Nonetheless, on one of the key fronts for driving change, politics, I still sometimes shake my head at the uphill battle. One step forward, two steps back. There is an entrenched attitude today that concrete knowledge, the survival skills such as economics and personal finance, are somehow demeaned, that there are better things to teach than those, that the idea of money should not tarnish childhood. But what are we really doing in education if not teaching kids how to survive and thrive in the real world? What are we doing if not giving them a roadmap to the fruitful plain? Hardship happens to all of us along our way. But this crisis brought home to me, our board, and our staff just how tenuous financial stability can be for many Americans and the toll that acute and constant anxiety takes on children. Just because we fail to teach them about money doesn't mean they don't worry about it. Knowledge lifts burdens. When teachers praise the support and training that CEE brings to our efforts to teach our subjects, among the very lovely words that they use, you will find relevant. Economics and personal finance education are not an entire answer. Nothing is today. But these subjects are an essential part of effective answers. The bottom line here, the measurement that counts, the smiles and optimism of our kids. And now we'll return to Steve for our fireside chat. And just remember, breathe through the pause.
Here we go. Thank you, Nan. Always thoughtful and heartfelt. And thanks for your fabulous work this year and guiding the organization once again through crisis. And we will be in person next time around, I'm sure. So now it's a great pleasure for me to introduce our honorees this evening, the amazing doers among us, those who use economics and finance to solve problems and bring enormous improvement to society in its wake. All of our honorees share a few traits here. As far as I can tell, focus and dedication and a bit of fanaticism, seems chief among these. Nothing is too small or too large or too extraneous for their attention. They demonstrate a mastery of information that's impressive and only surpassed by their energetic application. So alphabetically beginning here. Raj Shetty, last year we spoke at length about the economist Raj Shetty and his work on wealth inequality in the U.S. And only, except for that, he wasn't here to join the conversation. Now he is. Professor Shetty is one of the youngest tenured professors in Harvard's history, also the director of Opportunity Insights, which uses big data to understand how we can give children from disadvantaged backgrounds better chances of succeeding. He's won numerous prestigious awards, but one of the more intriguing of those is the MacArthur Genius Fellowship. It's a fascinating collection of thinkers and doers. For instance, it includes a wicked tough rancher, Bill McDonald, for his conservation work and new approaches to ecology and community. And Raj Shetty is all about new approaches, rethinking and retooling once we know the lay of the land. Big data, which I really want to talk to him about. Quantitative analysis delivers that. It's a tool for mapping our economic landscape and telling us what is really there, not just what we imagine is there. Exciting work. Excuse me one second here. Exciting work, both to be an explorer and a builder. Pete Stavros, hailed as a change agent in the world of finance. Pete is improving employee lives along with investment returns as the co-head of U.S. private equity for KKR, the $200 billion plus global investment firm. Excited about his work that it's actually sent me back to read another Pete Drucker, the father of modern corporate management theory. One of his key insights was that the worker is not simply a cost, but an asset. Pete is putting this in action today, focusing on the industrial and manufacturing sectors. In those sectors in particular, as you know, the working class feel disenfranchised and devalued. And listening to Pete's stories and reading about his work, I think his approach is captured by one dominant value: respecting the dignity of the worker and what they bring to a company's value. He does this by giving them a voice in the company and a share in the profits. It is transformational. For decades, Paula Valent has been putting kids through college, lots and lots of kids. She accomplished this feat by doing her job better than just about everyone else, by dominating in a male-dominated field. Paula was the chief investment officer at Bowdoin College in Maine, and her skill at managing their endowment meant that they could operate a need-blind admissions and no-loan financial policy. If your kid was right for Bowdoin, he or she went to Bowdoin. I can tell you that I can do this now because she's leaving Bowdoin. My son is a rising senior at Bowdoin. Just coincidence. And all because Paula was beating out even the Ivy League in returns. The famous investor Stanley Druckenmiller, who I happen to know, said that she has been at the top of her field for more than a decade. Stan is also an alum of Bowdoin. A prestigious feat, by the way, for Paula. In 2020, she was named one of the 100 most influential women in U.S. finance by Barron's. Today, she is good news for New York City's recovery. She's coming here as the next chief investment officer at Rockefeller University with responsibility for managing its $2.5 billion endowment. Welcome to our city, Paula. Welcome to all of our honorees. Feel free to use the audience should feel free to use submit a question feature for the Q&A to follow the chat. And now we're going to talk for what I see here is approximately 18 minutes. That's great. Okay. So I'm going to start with Raj for one particular reason. Raj, I am so fascinated right now by how we are looking and reading and following the economy with all new fabulous data sets. And this is probably the wonkiest place to start, but I'm so excited about this. Tell me what's going on right now in economics when it comes to being able to measure the economy in more real time than we ever have had before.
Yeah, absolutely, Steve. So thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you tonight. A delight to join the Council of Economic Education on a set of very important issues. So to your question, Steve, I think this is a very important and exciting time in economics because the advent of new data sources has really transformed our ability to measure and understand how the economy works with incredible precision. I think an analogy to kind of the biological sciences, the invention of the compound microscope, which allowed people to really see how things work at a cellular level.
Wow.
We're kind of getting that kind of vision in economics from modern data sources. So you were talking about tracking the economy. I'll give you one example of a project we've been working in our group at Harvard, which is developing a daily economic tracker using information from things like credit cards, payroll companies, lots of other transactional data sources that we've anonymized and aggregated to give people basically a real-time sense of what is happening during the COVID crisis and beyond, to economic activity in their particular neighborhood. So for instance, you can look within New York, what do job loss rates look like, neighborhood by neighborhood in New York City, week by week. Traditional economic sources where, we did surveys, we basically went around and called people up on the telephone or visited their house and asked them questions about whether they're working or not. You could never get that kind of scale and precision just because of the prohibitive costs of collecting that sort of data. Now, thanks to modern technology and tools of big data, we can do a great deal.
I'm going to switch over to Peter on this issue. Raj, I need to talk to you because we have to have this conversation offline for about 3 hours because we're trying to develop some of this stuff and get away from the old data at CNBC because, by the time something comes out a month after the month that we're talking about, you're already 70 economic cycles from the actual data that's out there. Peter, how important in all of your businesses and how much data are you kicking off and how important is the data that kicks off from your business to the value of the business?
How much is the data important to the value of the business? I mean, you could think of a company like First Data, which is a transaction processor, that the data that you get from a business like that, certainly incredibly valuable. We don't honestly have a lot of those. If you think about a garage door manufacturer, the data coming out is pretty discrete and distinct to a micro market within building products, which is obviously impacted by housing. So I think there's some businesses like that where the underlying data is probably tremendously valuable, but we don't have a ton of them.
We talked to some companies, UKG and Homebase. Those are two companies that provide us with. I'm just giving an example of this. They do work shift and time management at companies, and they aggregate that and they kick it off and they give us tons of data that they are able to anonymize and give to us. And who knew that a company that provided time shift software was to be able to tell us about what was going to happen in the jobs report in the next month? So that's been fascinating to me. Paula, let me turn to you. Thanks for doing what you did at Bowdoin, by the way. It was pretty important, and it's a heck of a school. I've been up there a couple times to visit my son, and he just loves it. So, tell me how. Well, I'm going to start where I probably should have started to begin with. Tell me the importance that you see in economic education and how important it is for kids coming out of high school to arrive at college for the rest of their lives with economic education.
I think it's extremely important. I was a first generation college student, and so I got out of high school. I didn't know anything. I was an art person. My background was in the arts. I pivoted later, but I think that economic education is really important, both for the kids in the school, but also for their parents. And even at Bowdoin, students take, economics, Keynes, and all this theoretical economics. And a lot of times when they come out of Bowdoin, they don't know how to negotiate a lease or just the basic things. And I think I was talking to my daughter about balancing her checkbook, and she didn't know what a checkbook was because they're doing all this electronic, things are going, fintech is taking over. But I do think that economic education and financial, not being afraid of money is a powerful thing. And also for the girls that are coming out of high school to realize that finance can provide them an incredible occupation, profession. I think that's really important. And I think that CEE is sort of driving that.
Raj, I want to ask the same question of you. What can you tell the difference between the students who come to school with an economic education and those that don't?
See the very varied backgrounds that students come to Harvard with, and those who've had some quantitative experience, some knowledge of finance. It might come directly from a class. Those who are fortunate enough to have such a class in high school. It might come from other sources, people who they happen to know, and so forth. I think that kind of quantitative literacy and financial acumen is increasingly important for all kinds of fields. And we're finding an enormous number of students who want to have that background and are trying to catch up when they come to a place like Harvard if they don't have it. So I see it as absolutely essential in the modern economy.
Peter, with your focus on employees and things like employee ownership and planning, how important is that? And is there a way that it can happen in the workplace?
Yeah, we kind of see the downstream impact of not having financial literacy take place in the school system. We have employees who, through this ownership program, for example, let's say they get a big payout. We sell the company. There's a big payout where hourly employees maybe earned 100% of their income as a one-time payout on their equity. And what can happen if they're not prepared is they can spend the money while they're in debt. So, we've had some early on experience of not preparing people for financial windfalls like that and seeing the downstream impact of them not being financially literate to begin with. And the interesting thing about CEE is it gives us an opportunity to go upstream in that same community. So we do provide financial literacy training in the company, and then in that same community, we try and go upstream with CEE into the school system.
Peter, I'm going to just stick with you and ask you to take a couple steps back and explain to people this fund that you're doing. What is this fund to promote employee ownership, and how is it going to change the world that we know?
So it's a foundation that we're launching in the fall. The provisional name is Center for Shared Ownership, which our early funders have told me they hate, so we'll probably change it. But the concept is that making all employee owners. So take Ingersoll Rand, a public company that we used to own. There's 16,000 people across dozens of countries, all of whom have ownership. The low income cohorts of that company have about $500 million of stock today. Nothing like that has ever been done before. In part because it's awfully complicated to issue stock to thousands and thousands of employees all over the world. So what we do, this nonprofit is first going to help people through the tax, legal, accounting, administrative burden, structuring, thinking through vesting, retention requirements. There's like a million micro problems to solve if you're going to broaden ownership to a whole company. And then from there, it's about how you build culture. How can you use 16,000 employee owners using that example and build a stronger company so people quit less, are happier on the job? You can see it through measured employee engagement scores, have better health outcomes, better safety, et cetera, and better financial literacy skills. So that's one part. And then the second part, to your point about how we're going to really change things, we're trying to build a movement. I mean, if we're all tired of wealth inequality, the economy is just a collection of companies. So it's going to have to happen at the company level. We're not going to get anywhere with wealth for low-income colleagues if we have all of the ownership in the hands of 1% of employees of a company, often mostly in the hands of a half dozen, which is what you see. Typically 1% to 2% of employees have ownership, and it's very concentrated at the top. So those are the two things we're trying to do.
I'm sorry to stick with you on this, because I'm going to pivot to Paula in a second, but quickly, do you make the case to Paula that she should invest in these companies because of employee ownership?
100%. Yeah, I think you're paying for, I think these should trade at higher multiples. You're paying for culture. You're paying for a more stable employee base that is more engaged. Just think about the impact that can have on product quality, on people being bought in on whatever the value creation objectives are, scrap reduction, customer satisfaction, what have you. If you've got more aligned employees who are less likely to quit and on a measured basis are more engaged on the job, right, I would say absolutely we should trade at higher multiples.
Paul, are you all in there?
Yes, I am. I think that ESG, that's the S part of the ESG. Gillian Tett once said that ESG is eye roll, sigh, and groan. That's what it used to stand for, but now it's becoming more and more important in how we look at our investments and how our managers look at our portfolios. As you say, if you have a good workforce that is supported and educated about finance and all that, they will do a much better job. And so I think that's definitely going to become more and more important as we try to attack the divide between the haves and the have-nots, which we definitely need to do.
All right, now I got to do some work because I got to be on TV tomorrow talking about the economy. So, Paul, I'm going to stick with you on this. One of the big stories right now is inflation. How concerned are you? Is there a way that you're thinking about positioning your portfolio for temporary or permanent inflation? What are your thoughts on that?
Inflation is a very big topic, and I talked to Stan Druckenmiller and Kevin Warsh yesterday. Wrote a nice editorial in the Wall Street Journal about this. the worries of inflation. Right now, it's hard to figure out what it would be a hedge against inflation. Is it real estate? Is it gold? Is it tips? Is it the same old things? Is it Bitcoin? I think some people would say that. I do think that there's this pent up demand in the economy for people to get out and do things. So I think the stock market is very frothy right now in certain areas. I also live in Maine. When I drive to work, there's help wanted signs where they're offering, a higher employee, higher pay. So I do think inflation is going to be a big impact. It's more unexpected inflation, like an inflation shock, that I'm more worried about. And then also the change in the methodology on how you calculate inflation is something that we have to get our arms around too. But we have a lot of growth and innovation. Someone said that innovation could be a hedge against inflation, which is an interesting thought.
Raj, I want to turn to you. What does the history tell us about this? I've been saying, hey, we don't really know what this looks like. Nobody knows what this looks like. Was this inflation where, at least for some point in time, where demand outstrips supply and that people come back to the stores before the employers do? Was that to be expected? Are there analogs to follow on this?
I mean, I think clearly this recession and this crisis has no precedent in terms of the particular structure. My sense is that, from the data we've looked at, others have compiled, it looks like things are kind of out of equilibrium in a sense that, the types of things that Paul was describing, help wanted ads, at the same time that lots of people are unemployed. The supply and demand don't really seem to be intersecting in the way that we would traditionally teach our students. And so my hope is that in a few months, things start to converge. And as a result, you get prices starting to re-equilibrate and so forth. Now, can we look to a historical guide and say, this is what happened, in the financial crisis or in a previous recession? I think that's hard to do because you've had a very unusual and specific nature of shutdowns of production in this crisis that hasn't been rivaled in the past.
So for what it's worth, I did a story today looking at, everybody's talking about the unemployment benefits, keeping people on the sidelines, childcare. I think all of those things are true, but there's a couple other things that are out there, which is some 2 million extra people retired during this crisis. You've had a decline in immigration. I'm here in Cape Cod. They don't have their workers from Bulgaria who normally come over. I think that's true in resort towns up and down the East Coast and in America. Peter, talk about your companies now. Is it difficult to find workers right now? And are you paying extra? And do you find it to be, you believe it's a temporary phenomenon or permanent?
It's extremely hard to find people. I mean, on the labor side, that garage door company I was mentioning, I'll just give you an example. So this is a company in Central Illinois, so maybe a couple hours from Indianapolis, 3.5 hours from Chicago. So it's a little bit remote and not a lot of it, labor coming into the market. And we've been fighting with local employers at this company for labor. So we would take our starting wage from 16 to 18 an hour. The other employers would go to 20. We'd go to 22. And then just last week, one of the employers went to $48 an hour. It's only guaranteed for 3 months, but $48 an hour. And look, to the broader point on inflation, that use that same company as an example, raw materials are completely out of control if you can even get them. So you look at that garage door industry, an average year, you'd have price increases in the industry from 0% to 2%. A hot year, maybe it's 3%. Year to date, prices are up 40% in the industry. So, I mean, just think about that. Somebody who was looking for a garage door in December to June, that was $1,000 is $1,400. I mean, I definitely am worried about demand destruction in some of these industries.
What do you do in response to that if you can't get the workers? Does it keep you, is your production level below where it was last year as a result of not having, and I guess I'm not sure what the benchmark is anymore. We can't figure out what our baselines are. We have to go back to 2019 really, but in comparison to what would be normal, are you below that because you can't find the workers?
We are. I mean, so one way to look at it would be lead times. So our typical lead time would be a week in that company. So you order a garage door, let's say you're a garage door installer, we would typically have it to you in 7 days from when you order it. We're at 8 weeks right now,
Wow.
and the industry is at 14 to 16 weeks.
Wow. Paula, as I understand it, inflation is not bad for all stocks. It's bad for some stocks. And that has to do with pricing power, and it has to do with profit margin. It has to do with operating margin, all kinds of fun stuff like that. Tell me how you look when it comes to just the stock market. I know you invest in all kinds of things, but just stocks and how you factor in and think about companies when it comes to inflation.
Well, I think one of the things about inflation is you have this commodity inflation that's happening, and you have a shortage of chips, for instance, for autos. And as Peter was saying, there's this whole supply chain that has been disrupted through the pandemic. It used to be just-in-time inventory, and now that's not working so well because the materials that you need to build your inventory are there's a problem in getting those. So in looking at the companies and inflation, I think equities should do well in a moderate inflation period. But again, it's the shock. But I do think that some of the supply chain, and then you see oil, which who knew it might hit $100 again. And so I think that it depends sector by sector on the influence of inflation. And then you also see some of like the SaaS companies and the technology companies that are sort of soaring, and they are, most of those are sticky subscription models, and maybe those are not going to be hit so much by inflation, or they can raise prices.
I'm afraid that's all the time that I have for questions. I'm going to bring Nan Morrison back in. Nan, do we have questions from the audience, or did I mess you up and blow through that time for that?
No. It's such a great discussion. I wish we could go for a long time. But we do have some questions from the crew. So this one comes from Loretta Mester, who's the head of the Cleveland Fed, because we don't want to lighten up on you guys after Steve. So her question is, do you have any concerns that the micro data will lead policymakers to be too reactive to very short-term changes? That might be even a Raj question.
Thanks, Loretta, for that. I mean, certainly, I think the way we use these data sets is extremely important. And so one of the things that we've been working on is trying to benchmark them against the traditional slower moving statistics that we're all used to seeing from things like the current population survey. And I can imagine, if you naively react to every fluctuation in these data, that can lead to overreaction by policymakers. But I think one of the things we have to learn is how do we extract the longer term signals that we should be paying attention to in these new microdata sources, and how do we kind of filter out the noise? And I think that's going to be one of the scientific challenges for the field to figure out in the coming years. And this crisis has given us an opportunity to start to figure that out.
I'm just going to agree real quickly with that, which is I deal with this stuff every day, and it's real messy. It's real noisy, and trying to get signal from it, even as exciting as all these data sets are, is very challenging.
And I'd like to note that I talked to Howard Marks a little while ago, and he was remembering back to when you had to do research on a company and you had to wait for them to send you the annual report. And now we're barraged with data. We have too much data, and so the signals are just so I just pictured Howard there waiting for his mail.
Very good.
So we have a question from Arkady Coleman. It's for Peter. Do you have a view on investment opportunities in online learning to leverage more knowledge in economics and finance to reach more students? So to the investor.
It sounds like a great idea. I don't know of one in particular to go after with that exact profile, but look, everything's going online. I mean, the whole COVID crisis across industries has just accelerated that digitization trend. So it certainly sounds interesting.
I mean, it does sort of raise a question. I don't know if Paula can talk about this, though, but my son did not do the first semester virtual. He took off that 6 months, and he had a grand old time, did a lot of work. Went back for the second 6 months, and it was sort of partially virtual. I don't know what you're hearing. Maybe, Nan, you answer this question. Are you hearing from universities that there are parts of the virtual education that were successful and will remain?
So, I never quite got out of high school on the education front. I'm a K through 12 girl. My mom used to say that she never got past second grade because that's what she taught. I think it's been a really, really mixed bag this year for students.
Yeah.
And my big concern on the education front is where everybody else is right now, is the kids who really need to be in school to learn it all, right? Because they're not hearing the English language. They may not have parents who are English speakers, native English speakers, and they're really going to be put at a disadvantage. And that is my big concern, and that's going to affect people even at the community college level and at some colleges across the country. You'll see it slightly differently, but I'm really concerned about those super basic skill sets for the students who really need to be with a real educator every day. I mean, we all know the list of hardships that the kids face at home when they can't be in that classroom environment. We've seen it a lot this year in some of our virtual offerings. Ask a happier question.
No, that's a good. Go ahead, Paula.
Yeah, both professors have, they really had to dive in to adapt and be flexible and pivot to use technology. And I think that there are things that they will keep that are hybrid, things that they saw that their students really, profited from. But I agree with Nan that it's going to be really good to get the students back in the classroom.
So this is really a great question that is a post-pandemic issue, which is, I don't know, Roger, if you saw the paper by Stephen Davis and others from Chicago where they did all these interviews, and they think work at home was 5% before the pandemic. It ratcheted up to something like 50%, and I think it's going to come back down to 20%. And they, among others, I think Goldman Sachs is one of them. Jeffries wrote a nice piece on this, are positing this pretty substantial productivity boom that comes from the pandemic. And I'm trying to coin a phrase here, which is that necessity, in this case, was the mother of adoption. We had all these technologies around and nobody thought to use them in this way. And we're using them. And what Nan said is as significant in the workplace for young people coming up as it is in the schools, because if you're a young person, you want to get seen by Peter. I want Peter to see me and see how hard I'm working. But if I'm at home, I can't do that. But if you're a guy like me and I don't much care anymore, I don't care if Peter sees me. He's either going to fire me or keep me on board. I don't know. Do we have a second, Nan, for Peter to talk about this issue of work at home, and does any of it remain? And maybe Raj can say a word about that. We're probably out of time, but what do you do?
Sure. Go ahead.
Sure, I can start. So work from home for us and at our companies, I think that you're right. Some of that's going to stay. In this war for talent, if you have no flexibility, you're not going to be competitive. At the same time, it's hard to build culture remotely. And a lot of these jobs are apprenticeship jobs where I just do think you need to sit with people and sit as a team and figure stuff out together. I just don't think it's going to work if we go too far down the remote side. So I don't know. We're probably somewhere in the middle. We're going to give some flexibility. We have a very, very strong culture we're sensitive to, and we believe that this is an apprenticeship job. At least what we do. And I think in the finance world, there's a broad feeling you got to get people together in person.
Raj, you got 2 minutes. That's what they tell me on TV all the time. You got 2 minutes. Go ahead.
I'd agree very much with what Peter just said. I mean, speaking from personal experience, both to this question and the last one, right, as a professor who taught remotely during the past year, my sense is there are certain advantages. For some students, there are actually some benefits of having that kind of access. You can learn at your own pace and so forth to some extent. But clearly, in the ideas sector and the technology innovation sector, there's tremendous benefit to being in the same place. I don't think that's going to go away. So I think the Steve Davis, Nick Bloom kind of estimates of moving to a 20% work from home sounds very plausible to me. And I think that could actually, there's going to be some sweet spot, right? There are trade-offs between the two things. 100% work from home, 100% going to the office. Those are two extremes, unlikely to be the optimal thing. Somewhere in the middle that I think will end up landing. And now that we've seen this possibility of doing things online, that it can actually kind of work, I imagine we'll find that middle ground that hopefully will benefit lots of folks.
I miss having this conversation with you folks in person. I do not miss the George Washington Bridge. Nan, back to you.
Thanks. I agree with Steve. I always agree with Steve. It's just safer that way. I have one more big question on the economy for all of you. How concerned, this comes from Graham Tanaka, one of our board members, how concerned are you about the expected rise in the federal budget deficit and federal debt as a percent of GDP? And what's the best, well, how concerned are you about those things? That's a little bit of a lens looking into the future because there's a lot going on right now in Washington besides infrastructure.
I am very worried. I'm worried for our children. And that's why what you're doing at Council for Economic Education is so important, because this is going to trickle through to our children and our grandchildren's, possibility in future. I think it's very scary. And it's like, I feel like we're playing musical chairs again, once more again with sort of this, excess. And I'll open up to the rest of the group.
Raj or Peter?
I think I'd echo that. I would put it in a broader perspective of, we have tremendous unfunded liabilities that we had even before in the context of the Social Security system, Medicare, and so forth, that created exactly the types of concerns that Paula is describing. And the current debt burden that's being added, amplifies that. But there is that deep underlying set of fiscal issues to begin with. And I think we shouldn't lose sight of having to address that longer term problem. Hopefully this crisis can help focus attention on those deeper long-term issues.
Yeah, and I don't have much to add, Steve. I would just say I worry about the dollar crashing long-term and what that could mean for inflation in a world where we're already worried about inflation.
I'm going to add that I remain open to learning what the limitations are for the fiscal budget deficit. Those that we thought there were do not seem to have held and created the calamities that people expected. And I think historically there is wide latitude for the reserve currency of the world to run large deficits, although I worry about them.
I think we're good. I think we're good. So I would like to say thank you all. What a great chat. We covered a lot of territory. This is my most favorite opportunity where I get to thank our great friend Steve Leisman, who does so much for us and who carried us through this evening. I really could not have done it without you. It always scares me when you get stuck on the bridge. I'm so glad that you still got to enjoy Cape Cod and they were not the same kind of obstacle. So thank you so much.
Thanks.
And of course, thanks to all of you who attended, all of you who gave. We got some nice donations this evening. And I'd like to just have a big toast to our board of directors, our hardworking and patient staff, our MC again, our honorees again, and all of our behind the scene helpers, and everyone else who might be wandering around. We really appreciate it all. Feel free to hang out at your tables. They'll be open for the next 30 minutes to enjoy the company of your friends and colleagues. And then I love saying this, go out and enjoy the summer, because we are almost done and we will see you next April all together live in New York. Thanks so much, everyone. Good evening.